to do defense well, you need to understand offense. You need to understand attackers. You need to understand how they think and operate. It's almost like two sides of a coin, without which a security program is not complete. Again, I'll go back to this topic of AI. Our view is that a perfect storm is brewing. Why? Two aspects. One is the threat actors are already leveraging AI. So that's creating, more sophisticated attacks, and it is reducing the barrier of entry for the threat actors to be more sophisticated, which used to be probably reserved for the top, 0.1%. Now it's becoming accessible to the broader threat actors out there, right? AI is really enabling the threat actors. And then the productivity use of AI written code, you can write 10x or 100x more code with AI. But some of the statistics out there indicates AI written code contains 3 times more security vulnerabilities. How do you build sufficient safeguards around these systems? And do you have a plan B? Do you have a kill switch if these things go wrong?
Hi there, welcome to the show. Today, I'm joined by Anthony Abraham, Deputy CISO for HPE. Anthony's career spans cyber defense at enterprise scale, and now he is responsible for advancing security architecture and zero trust right here at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Today, we will talk about how and what modern cyber resilience really means, what CISOs on this call should focus on, and how security and data protection are converging in a world where threats keep evolving. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gerald. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation.
Awesome, Anthony. We will get right into it, Anthony. So, we've been doing obviously a bit of research on you. Yeah, and your background is really interesting because you cover a huge range of security domains. You've covered threat intelligence, vulnerability management, endpoint, cloud, insider threats, cyber resilience, and also red team, which we'll get to in a bit. Now, that is a very complete view of modern enterprise defense. So let's start with a little bit of a brief introduction to you and your core responsibilities here at HPE, just so our listeners know who we're talking to today.
Yeah, that sounds great. I've been in the cybersecurity space for about pushing about 25 years now. Started as a sysadmin,
Okay.
doing Linux and all the Cisco routers and things like that, and then quickly found my passion in security.
Yeah.
Started doing firewall proxy type configuration. So network security was my entry point into cybersecurity, but I quickly found my passion.
Yeah.
Never want to leave. I feel like this is my calling. This is what I want to do, and I want to do it. I want to retire doing this.
Yeah.
So it's more than a job. It's a passion, and it is a higher mission. That's how I consider this role to be.
It's very nice to hear you say that, Anthony. Now, let's start at where you have come from. You've come from a relatively large organization, State Farms, where you have led the Cyber Defense Center, and you've built the offensive security and red team capabilities, right? Now, can I ask you, what did that teach you that a traditional defensive posture would have missed? Because that's real world experience. So we really want to, drive in from what you've actually learned at State Farms.
Yeah, Gerald. I spent 17 years at State Farm, and I've done all aspects of a cybersecurity program, from network security to offensive security, like which you highlighted. And I really wish I learned this early in my career, which is really to do defense well, you need to understand offense. You need to understand attackers. You need to understand how they think and operate. It's almost like two sides of a coin, without which a security program is not complete. So, think about a breach. After having a breach, you don't have the luxury of sitting down with the attackers and, hey, let's have a friendly conversation.
Yeah.
How did you break our defenses? What did you do after this step? There's no such opportunity. The damage is already done.
Yeah.
Offensive security, pen testing, red teaming, attack simulation, that kind of practices completely changes that equation and gives us a step advantage. Basically, these are hackers, very skilled hackers on our payroll, right?
Yeah.
Doing the good stuff
Yeah.
on the brighter side versus the dark side.
Yeah.
So they are able to understand and highlight key weaknesses in our layered defense
Okay.
for us to be able to improve that proactively. And
Right.
they are able to do this in a continuous way, being part of our company, caring for our company, so that it's a continuous process and it is a proactive process. So you don't
Mm.
have to wait for a breach to happen. You figure out the key gaps in your defense in depth, and then you proactively address that. That's how an offensive security program really complements the defensive program. And I would argue these days, without such a program, your cybersecurity architecture is not complete.
Wow. Okay. I was just about to ask you, was there a moment, a finding from this red team really changed the way that you guys thought about risk? Is there anything pivotal over your 17 years at State Farm that you found, oh man, if I did not have this guy, I would have not thought about this at all. Was there something like that? Plenty?
So many, so many such examples. Where do I
Yeah.
start?
Yeah.
Where do I start? It
Maybe one
is
of the most, interesting ones or pivotal ones or recent ones.
The beauty is, and I'll tell you, one of the I'll not probably go into too much specifics
Of
due to
course.
confidentiality reasons,
Yeah.
but some of the assessments that I've done with my team, we were able to compromise. There are war rooms when there is an incident,
Yeah.
when something is detected. There is a war room. Like defenders are sitting around a call, and then they are strategizing. How do I stop this attack? What do I know? So we were able to demonstrate gaining access into this war room as the attackers, again, friendly internal attackers,
Yeah,
right? We
of
are doing
course.
this for the right thing. And then we were able to observe each steps. And both sides are my teams. The defensive team is mine, the offensive team is
Offense. Yeah.
mine. So they were able to observe each step the defense was taking in response to the action the attackers were taking in disguise
Yeah.
without the defense team knowing, so that they were able to pinpoint and guide the defensive teams. Hey, this is where you went off a different track
Yeah.
after the assessment. This is what you should have considered. So the way I measure my red team is not by the number of findings, not by all the cool hacks that they demonstrate. It's by how they are making our defenders better. So by gaining that level of access, which was scary, but they were able to observe and really spot mistakes in our thinking and in our processes as well as our tools, and then step it up together. That's a tremendous example of, because threat actors are known to do these kind of things
Yeah.
for real. So now our defensive playbooks will factor in or will account for a threat actor potentially being on the line, live monitoring our activities, and then how should we compensate for that? That is a key learning. And having demonstrated that and that being real in a simulated exercise, that's such an amazing learning opportunity.
Yeah. Perfect. I really like how we started this. You said you can't defend well if you don't know what the offenders are going to think about or what they're doing, right? So this really lends into the whole point that if you don't have or you're not thinking about this, especially the CISOs who are listening to us, if you're not thinking about this, then your cyber resilience or your cybersecurity strategy is not complete, correct? So that's a really key finding, I think. And I think the practical value of having those the rating beyond just finding weaknesses is you actually know what to defend against and how to defend it, and it actually makes your defenders a bit better. So
Right.
yeah,
And a key point is, I think, especially for the CISOs out there,
yeah,
what we do at the end of every assessment, we have a purple team phase, which is basically we sit together and we improve. We talk about, oh, we did not detect that. How do we write a detection together so that we detect that next time? Or that control failed. How do we work together so the attackers are and defenders, the war game is over, right?
yeah,
Then they are sitting together and fixing things that we've identified. So we call it a purple team phase, and that is
perfect.
mandatory at the end of every offensive security activity we do. Otherwise, we are just throwing the findings over the wall and just walking away. What good would that do, right? Nothing. So it is really about improving your security posture in a continuous way.
Awesome. So really the practicality of having the red team is beyond just weaknesses, is actually coming together. And I like this concept of a purple team where, we sit together, how you attack me, how you've defended, and what we need to work together so we don't run into this. That's brilliant. I
Yeah.
really love
Red,
that.
red and blue together, purple. So
I
that's the
love that.
color.
Yeah, that's actually
Yeah.
brilliant. All right, now we'll move swiftly along to zero-day vulnerabilities. Again, another key consideration. We hear this come up a lot when we speak to other CISOs, when we speak to security experts. This comes up, so I like to get your perspective on this. Right, you have dealt with zero-day vulnerabilities. You have dealt with high-stake responses. Now, when something like that happens, how do you decide? Okay, the issue is going to be a patching thing. It's detection. It's segmentation. Is it recovery readiness? How do you decide? What the issue is and how do you go about resolving it, Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about a 0 day, by definition, that means it's previously unknown. There
Yeah,
are no defenses against it, or there is no patch, at
yeah,
least in the simplest term. So it's two different angles. One, we as the consumers of products, other products we use in our infrastructure, our switches and our firewalls, or our servers, our operating system, Linux, Microsoft, all of that. Or the other aspect is our own products. We could potentially have a 0 day in our own products.
yeah,
So the primary focus point is our customers. How do we protect our customers, and how do we protect their trust in us, the integrity of HPE, right? These aspects are the primary consideration. But things like 0 day, when you don't have a patch, your immediate consideration is, how do I reduce the harm? I don't have a patch,
yeah.
but I do have an ecosystem. I do have security controls. I do have compensating measures that I can take. And that is the key consideration. How do I reduce the harm? Knowing there may be a little bit of time for, let's say this is a Microsoft 0 day, they might not have a patch right away. So it's all about how do you reduce that attack surface
Okay.
by using the ecosystem, other controls around that particular system. Let's say your endpoint detection and response, EDR capabilities. Let's say your network security controls like your firewalls, your intrusion prevention systems, web application firewalls. There is the idea of custom virtual patches, basically customization you can do on your intrusion prevention devices or web application firewalls
Yeah,
to be able to utilize the threat. For example, right?
yeah,
It's going to be depending on what kind of vulnerability we are dealing with,
yeah.
but it's really about the ecosystem and compensating it first and then patching it very rapidly.
Okay.
Sometimes, Gerald, sometimes in cases where we might have to even bring that service down, and that's where we'll have to look at the business impact. We'll have to look at the business value versus the risk, and we'll have to make a risk-based decision sometimes. Let's say there's no compensating controls, and this is something that could harm our customer. We might have to temporarily bring that service down, and those are decisions. We don't take those decisions lightly. We take those decisions in context of the business and our customers, and do the cost benefit analysis, do the risk analysis to make those calls.
Awesome.
But one thing I do want to highlight is, we better be prepared as an industry. You might be hearing about all the new AI models, the Anthropic cloud mythos,
Yep.
or mythos, or way you say that. That's just an indication of what to come, right? These kind of models are really good at discovering 0 day vulnerabilities.
Mm,
That is the topic of the conversation within the cybersecurity space right now, right? With that news breaking. So we are going to have more and more 0 days. So it's very critical for us to have the right ecosystem around our critical assets
yeah.
and have a rapid patch program. And we all need to take advantage of AI, just like the threat actors are. Typically,
Mm,
these bad guys are a couple of steps ahead of us,
yeah.
and defenders are lagging, and we absolutely have to change that equation.
Awesome. That's very concise. It's scary, right? But that is the reality of things today. So you mentioned a few things. The first things, you reduce the harm, you identify the surface of attack, assess the risk, And then, if you need to bring a service down, you bring the service down because, you've done the assessment, risk reward, and all of that. Can I ask you, Anthony, you've been across a few of this, I'm sure, in your time. And you've probably worked with a lot of different teams. But what do the best teams do in that critical first few hours? Like, what will you say? Okay, these guys did something differently. How do the best teams react in those first few hours when a 0 day has been identified?
Right. First and foremost, and the way HPE we address this is to have the right skill set or right talent looking at this problem. So in our case, whenever something like this breaks, we have our best defenders and we have our best of offensive security folks, best red teamers sitting together.
Yeah.
We bring them together to say, hey, this is the threat, right? And we bring the subject matter experts, like IT folks, the various business unit folks. We bring the right brain power together very rapidly. It's a tiger team. We call it a tiger team process. Very rapidly, we assemble this group, and they are the ones collectively looking at this problem and saying, this is the best way to address this. Let's deploy this control. Let's create this custom rule on our web application firewalls or on our intrusion prevention devices. And that's how we compensate. So you'll have to have the best team looking at these problems. And you'll have to prioritize this based on risk. If this is an internal asset, you have some time, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can attack it directly. They'll have to compromise your network first before they can take advantage of that 0 day.
Yeah.
But if this is an internet facing asset, which is out there public, you have a very small window of opportunity. That's when you consider, do I temporarily bring the service down? Do I temporarily lock it down? Would I put a restrictive firewall rule around it for the time being until I can come up with good defensive measures? So these are decisions you shouldn't take lightly. These
Yeah.
are decisions we should take with the business context, with the customer in mind. And that's exactly how we approach this.
Awesome. Awesome. Now that's great. Now, just before we get into a HP specific, I just wanted to ask you, in conversations that I've had with our customers, a lot of them think they're ready for 0 day vulnerabilities. They're ready for a serious attack. Can I ask you, from your experience, what do you think is the biggest mistakes organizations are making when they think they're ready for a serious attack? What are they not thinking about, Anthony?
Yeah, I would say it's about practice. It's about testing your assumptions. You said like, and we all could be confident in our abilities, but have we tested it? Have we tested it through potentially an attack simulation, or have we tested it through a tabletop exercise, or or like a resiliency exercise? Just test those assumptions. Bring up realistic scenarios and see how the system performed under stress.
Yeah.
And that's the best indicator. So basically, practice, train the way you fight and fight the way you train. Basically, those two go hand in hand.
Yep. Actually, I like that because it actually flows out really nicely to what I was going to talk about from a HP perspective. So you mentioned, a lot of people say they're ready. It lives on PowerPoint somewhere. It lives on a slide deck version of it, or it lives on someone's document in a computer somewhere. But that failure of practice and testing and doing those tabletop exercise, I think that is the gap, right? So that's potentially one of the biggest implementation gaps that we see today. Like, you're not actually doing what you say you potentially can and will do. So I really like that. So Anthony, I'm going to focus about what you do at HPE now, from a security architecture, zero trust perspective. And obviously, you cannot reveal too much. But what do you see that we are doing right at HPE that our customers should be thinking about? So, what are the gaps that you think are there that we have done and implemented that our customers should be thinking about or should be doing?
One of the great things about us as HPE, we have a rich portfolio of cybersecurity capabilities.
Yeah.
Certo, for example, access security. Those are all, sort of the foundational pieces of our zero trust architecture. Again, we are lucky to have these companies within our portfolio. So, a couple of fundamental assumptions when we think about zero trust. One is the continuous verification and validation. But that starts with so strong identity. What's your identity management looks like? Are you leveraging strong authentication? Are you leveraging multi-factor authentication in all of your remote access points? Right? That's so foundational and fundamental.
Yeah.
And then how are you managing those identities? Because identity is the new perimeter, right? It's all about the threat actors. These days, they are not hacking in. They don't have to exploit a vulnerability. They log in with valid credentials
Yeah.
because people are using poor credential management practices.
Yeah.
So that's first and foremost your identity, the resiliency of your identity and your identity management practices.
Mm.
That's so foundational. Then it's really all about continuous validation. How do we know this identity, this user that's accessing our system, is that the right user, or are they in a state of compromise? Is this someone else with their identity coming in? And that continuous validation and then control points. Once you validate, once you identify a threat, do you have appropriate control points so that you can stop the harm from happening?
Mm.
Restrict access, step up, request another multi-factor authentication request, or need to have their manager validate or attest this is truly an employee. That kind of various step up measures you can take, but it's really about strong identity.
Okay.
It's really about continuous validation.
Yep.
It's about appropriate control points, appropriate choke points within your network where you can make those control decisions. And also, segmentation is a key aspect to this. Are you protecting your critical assets, and are you restricting access to those critical assets so that a threat actor who has access to a segment of your network cannot freely go everywhere? And in the industry, we call it controlling the blast radius, limiting the impact, even if a segment is compromised. This is how we think about zero
Awesome.
trust within HPE.
That's a very comprehensive strategy, and you're right, Anthony. We do have the benefit of having a good portfolio of products. This is not a product podcast, but from an source to target perspective, we've got the right solutions. Our B10,000 has inline ransomware detection. We've got Zerto for your continuous data protection, as you pointed out. We've got Access for that part of the business. We've also got our Store Onces, which is your purpose-built backup appliances, and our X10,000 for rapid restore, and we've still got Tape and our cloud-based storage offerings, right? Now, this is the idea with this, as you obviously know, is we want to build a modern platform that can protect from end to end, so from source to target. Now, in your view, and I've just rattled off a few product names, and I don't want this to be a product podcast, but I just want to find out, just want to get your opinion. In your view, what should customers expect from a modern platform that claims to protect data from end to end? Like, what should be a non-compromise? Like, at a minimum, modern data protection platform, what should I have? What are the components?
Yeah, yeah. We can, go in so many different directions on this topic,
Yeah.
but I'll specifically double click on one aspect that's very close to my heart, because it's really about the continuity of your core business. So cyber resiliency, data resiliency. Our CEO Antonio talks about how data is the new gold, right? Data is the currency of the modern world. So there is no business continuity without data. So often cyber attacks could they are not just IT risks or cyber risks. They are a risk against the core business. It's about the continuity of the core business. So the question is your security strategy, or is your data security strategy, is that resilient? Is that able to withstand attacks
Mm.
and help your core business continue? And there are a bunch of, or I would say four fundamental tenets to that equation. And I think you need to measure your security capabilities against those four fundamental tenets. And this is where HP really shines. I know, I'm not trying to sell a product, but we really have a comprehensive offering in this space. So that is the four tenets are immutable backups,
Yep.
because the threat actors are seeking and destroying backups before they encrypt your data, because they want to make sure you cannot recover without paying them, right?
Yep.
Let's say, and in the US, for example, you cannot even pay some entities. You don't want to pay, first of all. This
Yep.
is supporting crime if you pay a ransomware actor. And by law, you cannot pay certain actors. So
Mm,
let's say you don't have backups. They've destroyed your backup and they encrypted your data and you cannot pay. You will go to the jail if
yep.
you do. What do you do? How does your business run? This is non-recoverable data loss,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
That impacts your ability to continue as a business. So immutable backups is a key tenet. The second one is a clean room, an isolated recovery environment. It's almost like a surgeon, right? A surgeon is not performing surgery in a hallway. They are they are performing surgery in a sterile theater,
Sterile.
operation
Yep.
theater, right?
Yep.
So the same concept. You need a secure environment. You need an isolated environment where you can start to rehydrate your data to make sure it's not compromised. So do you have that part of your data security program? The third aspect is this concept of seed vault. It's not just about data. Data alone you cannot restore. You need your code, you need your configuration, you need your Active Directory, topology, hierarchy, you need your certificate infrastructure. So
Mm,
you need a bunch of things before you can start restoring data. Do you have these things stored in an immutable way? And last but not least is governance. That is really having these requirements embedded in your business continuity and disaster recovery plans, and then practicing them. Your recovery time objectives, your recovery point, RPO, RTOs, all of that are great on paper, but do you have confidence in your ability to actually restore? So that means practice, practice, practice,
mm.
continuous test, right? And then do you know if everything is down, what's the top 10 applications you'll bring up first and why? These are not decisions we can make under an attack. These are decisions we'll have to pre-position. We'll have to think about this in advance and pre-position it. So, and that's the governance pillar. So you'll have to ask, is your security program, is your data security practices comprehensive enough so that your business will continue after a disruptive cyber attack? I'll pause there to see. I know that was quite a bit. If you have any follow ups or questions on that.
No, Anthony, look, that's actually brilliant, right? And I think those four tenets that you've mentioned, it's kind of how we have built our source to target, edge to cloud protection, right? It starts with
Exactly.
immutable backups. If your backups are compromised, as you said before, we can't pay certain actors, certain bad actors. What happens to
Yeah.
your business? It goes under. Do you have a clean room? I really like that you use the whole surgeon reference, right? Because you're right. When you're doing something critical, you don't do it in the open wards. It is, sterile. It is protected. You're moving to a separate place because it's such a critical piece, right? So I think that might be the secret sauce that a lot of people are avoiding or maybe not considering today, right? That having that clean room for the worst day of your life, and then having the proper processes in place and the governance around what you need to do. And you're right, when we are under attack, I think decisions can just go off. So you need the proper governance. And I like that you mentioned, practice, 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 because on the worst day that you will have, you want to ensure that things go smoothly. So that's really good. It really again ties into what we have from a product perspective. You've underpinned that really well.
That's really awesome. Actually, we have a complete offering in this space, right? That's really amazing. Which company can claim that we can do this end to end? Very few, but we can as HPE.
Yeah.
End to end, we can do all of these things that I talked about. Our solutions, and other than the governance, is really up to you, the
Yeah.
customer, right?
Yeah.
They have to use the capabilities, but the other three, we provide in a comprehensive package. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, awesome. No, and thank you for saying that. Right? I mean, it's all easy to sell point products, but it's actually the ecosystem that we have to protect you, regardless of where your data lives. Right? So protecting from source to target, which is great. Anthony, we're going to change tack a little bit. Now, if and this is more for we'll do an executive level conversation and a technical value conversation. So, if you were sitting in front of a bunch of CISOs today, and you had the opportunity to speak to them, what will you tell them is a key thing that they should prioritize in the next 12 months? Knowing what you already know from your experience with State Farm and also the current climate kind of situation with where things are, what would you tell them
Yeah,
is their key focus? It can be one thing, it can be three things for the next 12 months.
yeah. Probably slightly longer answer to that question. Just I think the context matters here, and
Yep.
I'm sure this is resonating with the CISOs out there. Again, I'll go back to this topic of AI. Our view is that a perfect storm is brewing. Why? Two aspects. One is the threat actors are already leveraging AI, so that's creating more sophisticated attacks, and it is reducing the barrier of entry for the threat actors to be more sophisticated, which used to be probably reserved for the top 0.1 percentage.
Mm.
Now it's becoming accessible to the broader threat actors out there, right? AI is really enabling the threat actors.
Yeah.
And then the productivity use of AI, right? AI written code, you can write 10x or 100x more code with AI. And but some of the statistics out there indicates AI written code contains 3 times more security vulnerabilities.
Ooh.
So you are writing more code and it is prone to be more vulnerable, at least right now. We know the models are getting so much better
Yeah.
every day. So, that's going to improve. But right now, in this given state, this 10x code that we are writing or 100x code that we are writing is more vulnerable. Our old practices, how we used to handle vulnerability, code defects, how we used to address vulnerabilities, those are not going to scale anymore. Or even how we used to approach defense. Let's detect and respond to this. We'll execute our manual playbooks. We'll have the humans looking at the screen, right, responding to the threats, which we measure in hours and days sometimes. Our mean time to detect, our mean time to contain. Even best organizations are probably measuring this in minutes or hours.
Yeah.
That game is changing. AI is drastically changing that game. I think what I am really tracking going forward is how do we defenders take advantage of the AI advancements? How do we
Mm.
start using AI to defend our enterprises? How do we start using AI to address vulnerabilities, address code defects, so that we can scale with the way the technology is already scaling? We can scale the way our developers are already scaling. Cybersecurity today, I would argue, is lagging behind on that adoption curve. And the mythos type example that we talked about early is absolutely a wake up call that we cannot stop taking advantage of AI advancements in defending our organizations. Otherwise, we'll soon be irrelevant as a program because the avalanche of velocity and volume and smartness of the attacks coming based on these tools are absolutely something that a manual process or a human centric process without automation and without AI, it's not going to be able to withstand that.
Yeah.
That is what's coming. That's what's coming in the coming months,
Yeah.
6 months, 2 years. We are more deeper in this landscape.
Yeah. Awesome. No, that's really good, right? I think, for the CISOs who are listening, take advantage of AI, I guess is what you're saying, because, the attackers are using it. So make sure you're prepped for it. Make sure you're taking advantage of it to work on your defenses because they're not slowing
Absolutely.
down. So why should you? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's the only way to keep up.
exactly.
Unfortunately, that's how the picture is evolving.
Yeah, that's awesome, Anthony. Now, and this is slightly changing tactics. So that was more for the CISOs. Hey, those are the things that you have to think about, enabling your teams to, take advantage of AI. Now, if you were speaking to the security architects, the guys who are, in designing of this, what is the one thing you'll tell them is like, okay, this is the thing that you need to think of. This is the thing that I insist that you put in your environment. Is there one thing that you'll tell them you cannot compromise on this?
Yeah. Where do I start?
Yeah.
I have
So
so many things to tell them,
yeah, yeah,
but maybe I'll just make an associated point. The whole AI thing, the agentic AI topic, right? what are these agents? Are they, little digital workers? What are they? They have identities, they have access, they have permissions, they talk to each other, right? Through indirectly or directly. What is managing? I mean, is our jobs becoming like an analyst or an architect who is leveraging AI agents? Are you like now a manager of agents?
Yeah.
How do you think about almost managing this digital workforce? And what kind of architecture and what kind of safeguards are needed when you leverage almost like sort of independently thinking and operating digital workers? Right? That's a huge shift in the way how we use static controls in the past or scripting and that kind of automation, which was fixed logic, versus something that can probably think on the fly, probably upgrade its skills on the fly.
Right.
How do you manage? How do you build sufficient safeguards around these systems? And do you have a plan B? Do you have a kill switch if these things go wrong?
Mm.
You have more importantly or more critically, I think this is a broader question even for the CISOs. Do we have the skill set? If we are, let's say, fast forward 2 years down the line, we are living in a world of AI agents. Most of the work is always done by AI agents, and humans are simply supervising it.
Yeah.
Let's say these fail. We had to hit the skill switch. First of all, we need to have a kill switch. We
Kill
need to
switch.
envision that in advance. What is your plan B if these agents are not functioning the way you intend them to function? And once you press that kill switch, how is your critical business processes continuing? Do we still have the skill set, or did we lose it because we didn't exercise it? How do we keep that skill set to be able to take control? Almost like a pilot flying on autopilot.
Autopilot.
The autopilot failed at a critical point, and we've seen in the airline industry where pilots absolutely struggle to take control because they lost the basic art of flying. And there is an Air France, I think, crash. I forgot the flight number, but Air France crash was that it disconnected at the worst possible time, and the pilots did the opposite of what they should have done. And the whole plane crashed, and 300 some people died. So basically, when you have so much reliance on automation, and if you don't keep the basic skills alive, you wouldn't be able to take control. You wouldn't be able to take over the autopilot, right? How do we, as an industry, do that? So my advice for the technical audience is really to figure out how we create and manage trust boundaries for agents in agentic AI, as well as what is our mechanism if these agents go rogue for whatever reason, right? They don't follow the instructions or they are hallucinating. What is our exit strategy? What is the kill switch?
Yeah.
So all of those things are something that we need to intentionally design into the system as controls. So that would be my advice for the technical audience. How do we do that? Think through that, practice that, establish those boundaries, and test those boundaries rigorously.
Anthony, that is awesome. I mean, that's great practical advice for our CISOs who are listening. Great practical advice for our security architects, what they should be thinking about, especially in with regards to the source to target edge to cloud data protection strategy. I really want to thank you, Anthony, for taking your time to join us today to give us a perspective, a real life perspective from your experiences as someone in the front line managing red teams. And I like the fact that you use purple teams, that concept. You've given practical advice for the CISOs. You've given practical advice for the principal architects, with a few key things being, think about the immutable backups, have a strategy with clean rooms, have proper governance, and practice, because that's a bit of a gap. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us today. It has been a great conversation with Anthony Abraham, who is our Deputy CISO for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Hopefully you've learned a lot about our security posture, how security and data protection are coming together in a much more meaningful way. Anthony, once again, I want to say thank you very much for your time and for sharing your valuable insights with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.